A series of events led to a partial melting of the core of the reactor. And at that time, one of the issues and big questions was, if the core starts to melt, will we ever be able to stop this molten mass from going through the concrete pad underneath the reactor and contaminating the ground and the like? And the systems and the reactor behaved as it was designed to. There was core melting. The core melting was contained. Again, there were no radiation releases that put the public in any harm or danger. I mean, yes, we lost a multi-billion-dollar reactor and the money that was invested into it. But the point of the matter is that was a very serious accident. And yet nobody in the public was injured from that. And you know, it sort of demonstrated this philosophy that the industry has always followed, which is called defense in depth, where you have multiple barriers to the release of radiation to the general public.
What fear do we have? There's some concerns we might have, like if there is an accident and if there is enough hydrogen created because of some reaction that happens with a cladding material, zirconium, with water, there might be some hydrogen. That could lead to some concern, but then there are so many safety features in a reactor, like hydrogen igniters and things to take care of that even that is not a concern. And these safety features were reinforced more so than they were before, after the TMI accident, when this was becoming an issue that people were getting concerned about. Chernobyl accident is an outlier. The Chernobyl accident to me would be defining like someone trying to lift off a plane with having the wings cut off. That's what was Chernobyl.
Chernobyl is something that never could occur in this country because we don't build reactors like was done in Russia. It's a very different type of reactor. The bottom line there, the real simple answer is, didn't have containment. So it's not even licensable in this country. Our rules and regulations for licensing nuclear plants would never allow that to be licensed by the NRC, let alone built. So it's actually pretty irrelevant from our standpoint.
The safety record in this country is ridiculous. It's so amazing. You can't find another industry, that can say that they've been operating as long as we have, for instance, and have never had a fatality. I mean, it's just insane. Think of oil refineries and coal mining. I mean, they're so desensitized to death in those industries that, another oil refinery fire could happen 6 months from now, and it would make a newspaper maybe in page 17 in a bottom corner.
From coal all the time, and if you were to take a hard look at those fatalities, those dwarf any predicted fatalities that would come from nuclear energy.
You have the problem with black lung disease,
the pollution of the atmosphere.
Look at how many coal accidents we have and how many miners get trapped.
But nobody ever calls for the complete abolition of coal mining or use of coal. That's what's happened in our industry. And we've never had a fatality. I mean, people want to shut this thing down with absolutely no good reason.
We do have solid wastes that we have to deal with. These are the very highly radioactive fuel that, once it's run its course through a reactor, something has to be done with it. A variety of ways to go. Most nations around the world have decided on deep geologic disposal. That seems to be through, again, studies conducted in many countries, basically agreed upon best way to store the wastes and isolate them. Now, when I say store, what does that mean? The objective is to put the wastes into a location such that they are isolated from the population for a time until they decay back to the level of the uranium that was originally mined. And if you can do that, then after some period of time, the toxicity it's benign, it's neutral, it's the same as what it came from. There are a variety of ways to deal with the fuel. In this country, we've decided to do a permanent burial, and we are doing what's called a once-through cycle. So we take the fuel rods, which come in assemblies out of a reactor, And the idea is they'll be packed inside of casks, and those casks will be encased in a couple of layers, shielded, and placed in a permanent geologic repository, which here in the U.S., Yucca Mountain has been selected as that repository, and they will be permanently set there until they decay. That's going to take a long time. It's going to take a really long time. That could take hundreds of thousands of years.
First thing we need to do is reprocessing. All right. Number one, it will reduce the cost of nuclear fuel. Number two, it removes a lot of long-lived isotopes and things that we have to take care of. And number three, it just doesn't make sense to take 50, 60% of the fuel that's usable and store it in some sort of system. And so I think reprocessing is an absolute key. You look at the rest, I mean, France does it all the time. We've had cases where our reactors are buying French fuel because it's cheaper, because they're doing reprocessing. They've proven you can do it safely. And the concept of nuclear proliferation is to me just a hogwash in terms of, especially if you can do it in federally controlled facilities and stuff like that.
The next problem that came along was really just the engineering problem of being able to build these plants on budget and in time. And it turned out we were just totally incapable of doing that in the social structure that we found ourselves with interveners and the public able to.
When I was in the industry back in the 80s, and intervention in the regulatory process was extreme, forcing companies to spend a lot of money trying to get these projects licensed, and that regulation was changing at a very rapid rate, especially after 3 Mile, and to the point where those of us trying to build nuclear plants were forced to really be modifying the projects after they were 3/4 of the way constructed, which is just driving costs through the roof.
But to a large extent that was the industry's fault itself for lack of standardization. Every plant was unique, and so every plant was its own separate battle. The French have gone with standard designs, and they haven't had that problem.
We see that today they can be operated. Sort of the theory is proven with today's plants, and that they can be operated extremely cheaply. Again, they're operating significantly less than coal and gas is wide. But the capital costs are very, very high. They're still high. And I think the incentive for taking those capital costs will come in the form of penalty on carbon generation, on greenhouse gas generation. And so that's yet to be seen.
What if there is nuclear? What if there's alternative energy? And what if there is not?
You can't get into this and say that nuclear energy has no problems. But you can't really say that about energy in any energy source. And getting to the point where people will honestly say, if we go nuclear, there are certain benefits, there are certain problems we have to deal with. But that's true of every single energy source.
We have got to look for putting together a set of solutions, not one single one. And that means nuclear. It's going to mean some coal, because in certain areas coal is going to be a preferred choice.
Right? I mean, I think people in general, and it's a good inclination, want to optimize the amount of traditional renewable sources, whether it's wind, solar, maybe not hydro so much because it's got some environmental consequences that people are already having problems with. And we will push to do that because people want that. I mean, across the board, I think people want that. But I think if you look and project forward, you're going to have to increase baseload at some point, right? And when that puts you into coal or nuclear power. And so I think in the end, we'll end up with some mix of all these sources. But it's hard for me to imagine that nuclear won't be a part of the discussion, especially for large baseload.
Right now, the #1 concern in the world is energy. And the resource that can meet it in a proper shape is nuclear, because everything else is not mature. The technology is not mature enough. You cannot provide the hundreds of gigawatts of energy or more that is needed to sustain the world the way it's going on, the way it's developing, with the soaring needs.
Today, you can't build a gigawatt solar plant. You can't build a gigawatt wind farm. It's too expensive. It's too costly